Okay, everyone, good morning. Another week down. The short weeks always feel like long weeks, but we did it, another week. Thank you all for being here. Today's PDI is focused on Match and Fit, which is a big focus in the fall as students are doing their applications. For those of you I don't know, my name is Caitlin Venta and I manage my Scholarship Central. Laura is out today, so I am taking over hosting duties. So hopefully everything goes well today. She has taught me well. And we, as is always our philosophy with PDI, lots of grace and space and patience as we go through things. Ashley will be monitoring the chat today, so if you need anything, she'll be checking that and bringing the questions to the group. She'll also be putting any documents or links that we need. And a big thank you to Monica for helping with notes. And of course, we'll introduce him later, but big thanks to Trent Ball for doing our presentation today. So we'll go ahead. Uh-oh, I lost my screen share. Come back. There we go. So we'll go ahead and just start. So to start, we're gonna do our welcome and our housekeeping. We'll do our breathing exercise. We will do our breakout groups to get to know someone. Then Trent will present on Match and Fit. We'll talk about some virtual tools and then we'll wrap up. We're aiming to keep to an hour today, so we're gonna do our best to do that today. So as you know, we start each meeting just so we're all on the same page. It is, as we've been saying for 6 months now, an unusual time. So we're going to give ourselves and others grace and space. We may have visitors, four-legged or two-legged, or swimming visitors, flying visitors, you never know. Let's just all remember to give each other grace and patience. Please also abide by the PDI meeting agreements. So these are just agreements that we all make together as a part of this group. Please remain on mute unless you're presenting. We don't want any background noise. Do what's best for you. We would love to see you on video, but if you don't want to be on video, that's totally fine. If you have any questions or want to react to anything, the chat is a great place to do that. And as always, our reminder that private chat is not private. Next, just a reminder that there are a number of great PDI workshops coming up. 2 notes on the next ones. The next 2 do cover financial aid. The first one is going to be kind of general financial aid and talking about special circumstances, especially as it relates to COVID. And then October 9th will be much more FAFSA focused. So both on financial aid, but 2 different topics, but all of those are there. Okay, so next we're going to do our breathing exercise, which I need after that exciting internet moment that we just had. So we're just going to take a moment, and this is called starfish breathing. So you can use this little starfish as a guide to your breathing. And I also want to recognize that today is September 11th. So if you choose, you might want to hold the people who lost loved ones or who helped work with those on September 11th as you do your breathing. So just take a moment. You can close your eyes if you want, or you can watch the starfish as you want. And you're just going to look around the starfish and you're going to inhale up and hold and exhale down. And then inhale, hold at the point of that starfish, and exhale. We're going to inhale and exhale, and I'll let you finish up on your own without talking. Thank you for taking that moment with us. We hope that these breathing exercises are not just something that you can use, but also something that you can share with the students and families that you're working with this year. So, nice little place. So now, without further ado, we are going to begin our presentation. So Trent Ball, who is one of the co-chairs of St. Louis Graduates and works with students at Southeast Missouri State University, will be presenting today on Match and Fit considerations. And he got a lot of feedback from the signups, and it's going to cover a lot of the questions and the concerns that people brought up there. But I will turn it over to you, Trent, and Trent, just tell me when to move your slides forward, but the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to see so many people I haven't seen in a while. I see so many friends in the or used to be friends or want to be friends or will be friends after this is all over. So we took the questions and laid them out to discuss. I see Tamika smiling. I miss you. I haven't seen you in a while. Sorry about that, Jack. Guys, personal privilege. Um, there's always a conversation about, for our students, the importance of match and fit. So I'm going to start by looking at match and fit and breaking those up. I always say that match is practical and fit is emotional. So in defining match, we're talking about what's best for the student financially, program-wise, activity-wise, and structure at the institution. But fit is just as important. And so often, fit is going to be the culture of the campus, the feeling of connectedness, and is it really where they see themselves going and graduating? So often our students have this idea in their mind, I want to go to this school, I want to be at this university, but then we have to come in and have that real conversation about affordability, about access to it, about visiting it, and also will it be a place they see themselves graduating from? So let's not confuse the two. I see, like I said, match is practical and fit is more emotional and connected based. How does selectivity impact match and fit? In Missouri, there are 4 levels of selectivity: open, moderately selective, selective, and highly selective. And right now, we all know what's going on. So many institutions are making the decision because of COVID to drop their ACT score or the need for ACT. But now I'll give my disclaimer. This is Trent Ball St. Louis graduates. This is not Trent Ball Southeast. So let's not get caught up in that. Tamika smiles again. Number one, what's clear about this is the decision to drop an ACT score is not an access issue. It's an admissions issue. Don't get the two confused. Most institutions still require an ACT score to provide scholarship dollars and certain levels of support. Don't get caught in that trap. Oh, there's no ACT required. Now I can say that because for 10 years, through our College Access Partnership Program Award, we've now required an ACT for that program. It's been successful because the program has with it support built in and financial dollars. So when you hear about test optional, remember that that's an access. That does not mean access. That means admissions. Okay, please move forward. So these are questions that came directly from everyone. Number one, the implications of COVID-19 on testing. Extracurricular activities, affordability lead to certain challenges. Schools say that they are test optional, but if used for scholarships or scores listed on the transcript, how optional is it really? That is the point I was just discussing. Now, I do believe that there's been a decision made to look at a more holistic picture of students for admission. I think that's a very positive point, because we all know that test preparation and test availability is not the same to everyone. But ironically, right now, no test is impacting everyone. This is the time for you to work with your students to put together the best shine they possibly can for their institution. So these activities, issues of affordability, scholarships, start helping the student put together a full picture that will help lead them to the proper match and fit. Don't get caught in the idea of, oh, now I can go to A, B, and C because they're test optional, because will the support be there if you're not coming in at the selectivity level that you need to be? Number two, how are community colleges being viewed differently during a pandemic? Are families considering them who would not have considered pre-pandemic? Yes. Part two, yes. There's been an increase in enrollment at community colleges because a lot of people are really concerned about the spread on campuses. But the first part is interesting. I'm always concerned when people look at community colleges as an add-on or a less than. Many of our students need that preparation. They need that time to get that strong academic foundation for their transfer to a 2-year school. So though I'm excited about the idea of people are giving it more of a look, please don't view this as an option that's not best for everybody. Even if it's not your beginning point, you can save money and you can be more prepared in summer courses or pre-college courses at a community college. I'm kind of sensitive about that chagrin we put on community colleges. Any questions? Because if not, I will talk the whole time.
There's one question.
Okay, go ahead. Let me just jump
So
in.
a lot of a lot of students are having to push back their test dates due to cancellations and no open spots, et cetera. So how does that affect the timeline for scholarship decisions?
I believe that they shouldn't wait for the testing. They should go ahead and submit their application information and then follow with their admissions counselor to find out just how that's going to impact it. Because I know that dates are moving all over the place. And people are making decisions, scholarship decisions, actually more tied to what's going on with the FAFSA right now than ACT. So submit your portfolio and information, make that connection to the admissions counselor or person, and make a tickler in your file to follow consistently. Because I do believe there's going to be a lot of flexibility this fall and next. Excellent. What particular details should students who are applying test optional look for to assess match? Great question. Supportive structured services. If you are applying for an institution or helping a student apply for an institution that's test optional, but previously it would have been more of a challenge to be admitted, make sure that you can actually identify and students identify the proper support services that they need. I don't mean just at the very beginning, I mean consistently. We're looking for tutoring centers, supplemental instruction, counseling programs, advising programs. If on their campus trail programs, you want to make sure that you're transitioning your student from your level of support to a campus support. Because once again, test optional is an admissions issue. It's not an access issue. We have to watch out for that. How we support students sports. How do we support students with college selection information in a virtual space? Number one, Ashley, where's Ashley? There you are. I'm going to share with you guys something that Ashley probably already knows about. Earlier this week, College Advising Corps put out an outstanding virtual guide for advising. I'll make sure that gets to you guys. But the key point of it is, and I said this in my breakout room, is that ironically, we don't make this normal. We don't normalize this. We make it a tool that we use to work with students. Because when we get to our campuses right now, most campuses are still doing some version of in-place advising. But number one, make sure your student has proper information about the institution. Once again, their test dates and scholarship dates. Number three, that you have a virtual visit. And that's a key point. Everybody right now is putting together their 2-minute videos and bragging about what their school's actually doing. Make sure you sit down and have time with your student or students to go through those videos and information to make sure that they're seeing what they would normally see on a visit. And people put it on their best face, but also be able to ask questions. If you can't contact an institution, set a virtual appointment to talk to a admissions counselor about what your student needs because of this, that's going to be a challenge. One key point in this virtual space is to make sure that you have a contact that you can work with on key campuses your students often visit and attend. And before you bring your student to the virtual session, you actually have one. So you can model for the student that discussion piece to have in this virtual space. Because a lot of times our students are used to this, and our students can be, tech aware, but not necessarily tech savvy. So make sure you have that connection, you have that conversation before you bring your student in. And when your student's with you on the Zoom or through Microsoft Teams, that you encourage them to ask questions to get used to the fact that right now, this is our space. And boom, lost my PowerPoint. Caitlin. Okay, haha. I have it over here too, though. So now we'll take questions until our PowerPoint pop back up. What do we have next? Now, I know you people, I will call on folks if nobody asks any questions. Okay, I will call on, who did I see? I thought I saw Andrew. Saved by the PowerPoint.
I'm back. Sorry, I do not know what's going on with my internet this morning, but I'm glad we're not losing it completely.
No problem. But Andrew, I said, you have any questions since I called on you? Haha, he dipped out on me. No problem. Okay, how is the current situation changing how students and families find their best fit? Number one, visits. So often right now, students don't have a chance to do the actual physical visit, but I believe some campuses, we are Southeast, are adapting to the situation. That's been a key point. But once again, this also gives a chance to work with families as well as students to prepare for this virtual space and this virtual conversation. Number one, if you can't visit, set up a virtual visit. Number two, coach the families through what they need to be able to ask during that visit so they're not just kind of hanging out. Number three, this current situation is really making people think about keeping their students closer to home. I always think about how does that impact the match part? Because we also know that scholarships and opportunities in the first year are not the same in year two or when you transfer. So a lot of times families are making more decisions about health and safety, which is very, very important. But that also is going to impact both match and fit. Question? Got you. Okay. COVID-19 presents new challenges regarding in-person and online options. How are universities and colleges addressing the need for digital technology? I hate people say great question, but actually it is a really, really good question. Because we know that a lot of our students borrowed, visited, and sometimes had limited access to technology. When we get to campuses, it seems to be exacerbated. So right now I'm talking to a lot of students on their campuses about what can be done to borrow equipment, what's rentable on campuses, and then what do they bring with them. And if you bring your IT, your technology to campus, does the campus have the capability to upgrade and assist with that information? Like right now with us, all of us are doing this sometimes. You turn your camera off, keep the bandwidth down for using Zoom and Teams. So we got to make sure that our campuses have the capabilities to help our students either rent, borrow, or upgrade materials that they have. Number two, a lot of organizations right now, community-based organizations, are providing dollars to students to buy technology. Make sure to check that out. Question? Come on, you're killing me. Are institutions planning to remain test optional after the pandemic? My personal opinion, yes. Because once again, this is an admissions issue. And we all know that the conversation out there is that demographically, enrollment is going to continue to decline. I believe that there's a shift in that. There are students who want to go to college and eligible to college. And once again, this change to test optional is going to open up those admission standards more. We have to make sure that you're picking this institution that, I keep saying this, the match portion is the pragmatic portion. The fit portion is the connectivity and the emotional portion. So if we're looking at institutions after this pandemic passes, don't drop the rules about why they're going where they actually go. And don't discourage students for a plan that begins at a community college and moves into a four-year school after that point. How do we help adult learners find the best match and fit as they're returning to school? Now, one thing that happens often when there's a critical change and shift is we have more adult learners looking into going back to school. My first suggestion is always, is the scheduling for coursework and the scheduling for support flexible? Years ago, as a lot of institutions began to go to online programming and virtual programming, we found out that the number one adult learner that's successful is usually a single mother who signs it at 9:30 at night after the kids are down, and they can work from 9:30 to 1. We have to make sure that support for our adult learners is flexible enough that it doesn't fit our traditional 9-to-5 world. Does the institution they attend have tutoring services, SI services, and advising services after 5 p.m.? If it's a virtual situation, are they taking appointments consistently? So the key for the adult learner is what services are there? What services exist they can have that fits their schedule? Because so often it's not a normal traditional schedule that we're all used to. Many of us now have adapted to this changing situation, but even now we have to make sure that we're available as well. We are flying through this. Oh, I see a question. I'm excited.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. So the first one actually that came through was, do you see institutions moving towards providing more robust services to non-traditional students, such as on-campus daycare, after hours advising, et cetera?
Yes, and I don't think we have a choice, truth be told. We're going to have to be more flexible. We're going to have to make this plan because, again, if we're going to solve our enrollment crisis, we're going to have to broaden our scope of who we serve, when we serve them, and how we serve them. But a key one, we mentioned advising. I like the fact that you also brought in daycare and aftercare, because we're going to have to be able to address the fact that most non-traditional students are also parents. So how do we plan for that? And I do see institutions becoming much more reflective of who they serve, taking into account the non-trad, taking into account the transfer student, expanding their services for students who begin, and now the test optional does gives a perception that we're going to be more, and I don't want to crash test optional to selectivity, that we're going to be more intentional in the profile of the student. We're going to learn more about the student actually does need to be successful. So yes. Number two.
With remaining test optional, how do you feel that the conversation around college entrance exams will shift moving forward?
I sat on a call a couple of days ago with the Missouri ACT Council and asked that same question. And I believe that what you're going to see is a lot of institutions and a lot of colleges working with high schools to provide more test preparation, more affordable test preparation, and more thorough test preparation. Because they're going to understand that this test optional is going to hit them. And one question that was answered was, do we see in Missouri this being permanent? And ACT said no. Colleagues on the phone said maybe. I look at enrollment trends and I say yes. So just like when student loans changed and went from private lenders to the federal government, organizations began to adapt their support. This will be the same situation. ACT, SAT, GRE, because they're also having a conversation now about even at the grad level entrance testing, will have to provide more support and more structure if they want to remain a viable business. Number three.
No more questions from the chat yet.
Ah, okay.
I say, Trent, I can jump in with one.
Please
Thinking
do.
about advising students this year, obviously thinking about next year, there will most likely still probably be some COVID pandemic regulations on campuses. But hopefully when students are juniors and seniors, there won't be, and life will be looking a little bit more normal. So how do students balance picking a school now versus picking a school for the future? Do we just focus on what's going to be the best fit the first year, or should students be thinking of where can I be successful for 4 years in really two different worlds right now versus hopefully where we will be in 3 to 4 years? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I actually believe that institutions and school districts are going to embed more of this virtual learning and this virtual access moving forward. Because we're going to have to be able to use these tools to be successful, and it can assist with access. If we're talking about the work that pre-college counselors are doing, they're going to want to keep some kind of virtual connection and build that and educate their students on how to use that properly. Because I do believe that even when this is all passes, we're going to still embed some of this work actually in. Because I can say for myself and my colleagues, we all feel like we've all worked so much harder and differently since last March. We're not going to let all of that go. We're going to come a little more, like I said earlier, we all have become much more tech savvy and move past being just tech aware. So I believe it's going to embed in. People who are talking to juniors right now, I would still be discussing the virtual structure. I would still be embedding that piece actually in. For those of us that do pre-college counseling, we did a lot of interviews with students in the spring. And once again, I'm always excited about that part because you're talking to people who really still have that high hope and that high interest. And I think it helps all of us. So helping your student use this tool consistently and not letting it go, and helping them use it more productively. Like I said, students can play hell out of some video games. We got to make sure they're able to do the same thing with using this virtual space to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's helpful. Thank you.
No problem. The big question. How do we intentionally work around racial bias in the selection process? I was on a panel last night talking about race in education. One of my colleagues said something very important. We have got to stop acting as if that does not exist. Wishing it away does not make it go away. Understanding what it is, how it impacts, and what occurs when you ignore it, because I think that there are two ways to look at this. Sometimes bias is intentional, and sometimes bias is negligent. I believe with some students that we serve, it's not a negligent bias, because a lot of professionals are coming from a lens of themselves and their children and their option. And one conversation that came up was, well, you know, college is for everybody. And my comment was, everybody in this room is sending their kid to college. So who are we talking about when we say there's no racial bias in the process? Accepting that racial bias in the process means that we help our students look at how things are presented to them in this selection process. If you're doing virtual tours and you're doing online and website review, you're talking to families, what are the institutions showing you and your students about equity? And notice I danced past the word diversity. We can all make things diverse, but that does not make them equitable. And so often racial bias is built in on a lack of expectations of where our students can go and can be successful. So you work around it by, number one, acknowledging that it does exist and not ignoring it. Number two, knowing that it does exist, what is your plan to help the students see a broader scope in making that selection? And number three, are you ready as an advocate for that student to call it out when you see it? Are we letting our students be guided towards certain institutions or certain options and away from things because people believe they can't hit that challenge? But I'm not saying that people are walking around always with bad intentions. I don't believe that at all. I believe that most of it that we encounter is going to often be negligent, which is not what they do to you, it's what they don't do for you. Once again, this is my statement. No questions? I know I wasn't that good, people. Come on now.
Okay, I have a question.
Thank you, Amber. Don't let me drown out here.
Well, it's regarding to what you said earlier, because I've kind of been stuck on it since. So earlier you said that match is more practical while fit tends to be more emotional. So, you know, when we usually advise around that fit piece, you know, usually students can visit, you know, a college campus and determine if it's a fit because they get to interact with other students, with their staff, you know, what the campus is like, what the surrounding city is like, and things like that to kind of help them say, like, if this can really be a home away from home and can they live here for 4 years. But since we're now virtual and campuses are limiting those visits, those on-campus visits, how would you advise us to work with the students to find the emotional fit?
You hit a key point. As institutions are preparing to engage with you virtually, are they bringing students in? Are they bringing somebody from the community in to talk about their experience? We're now setting up these structures to have a virtual visit. And who's presented to you and your students tells you if they've given intentional thought to your students. Is it not just the usual suspects? I don't want to see a student government president. I want to see a kid that looks like my kid, who is struggling like my kid, from my kid's background. If they're just giving you this flat, canned virtual presentation where it doesn't cost any money, because nobody's traveling, if we're not putting together intentional views for you, that's an issue. Number two, if your institution is in a town gown situation, they should have people from the town or somebody from the town putting together a welcome and a support for your students. If not, ask for it. Right now, you guys have the power because you can structure what you want your students to be able to see to make that decision. And for all of us, we can think more carefully about not just replicating the experience we would have, but there's no reason why I couldn't be able to find you a faculty member for 30 minutes to interact with you and your student, or your student and the family. So we need to all be laying out our checklist of what we want to see virtually in our selection process. Because if you're just getting the can set up and the regular okie doke, then nobody's really thinking about what your student actually does need. I have a checklist of things I'm looking for. If they don't show it to me, they get crossed off my list. And no, I'm not sharing that list. I saw that look. Well, maybe. But we have to start really thinking about that part. You know, the virtual world makes it possible for a lot of things that you couldn't normally get to be ready. It's not the run through, here's the cafeteria, here's the classroom, here's the dorm room, bam. It's, you know, I have 3 of my students, I want to do a virtual visit with your campus. I want to see a student from this major. I want to see somebody talking about res life. I want somebody talking about advising and financial aid. Can you set that up for me? And that becomes the real discussion as you build a structure of what you know your students need to actually see. So right now, we're going to be hard pressed not to make that cell work, Amber. And I think Andrew redeemed himself. I thought I saw a question pop up.
Yeah, there is a question from Andrew. So are there any policies or legislation on the state or federal level that we should be paying attention to that affects our work?
Yes. At the state level, there's conversations about what happened with some of the CARES Act funding. And was it accessed by community-based organizations at the same level it was accessed for institutions? Number one. Number two, don't forget that institutions did not have to use all of that money in the spring. Some students were able to access money for the fall. So the big question should really be, what are you guys doing right now with those CARES Act dollars? And that's kind of a little plug because the St. Louis graduates were actually asking that same question to 15 of our schools. But we want to make sure that as those things impact our students, we know about it to properly advise them. We all know a student that says, I need scholarship money, I need grant money, and that's the end of their conversation. Are we asking them how they seek that out and what campuses are doing about it? So for example, we know some campuses that are using dollars right now to do emergency support for students. So when you ask those questions about that visit, ask about that level of support. Because I'm with Caitlin, this is going to be something that unfortunately we will still be dealing with in fall 2021. And if not, there'll be some structures that we will have adapted now that do become part of what becomes our future normal. I'm still resisting this being a current normal though. I'm still holding on to that.
And Trent, you may know more about state aid, but I believe that I saw that Bright Flight awards were less this year than expected, which my guess is that they may continue next year. Bright Flight, Access Missouri, A+, which will have a big impact on students.
As I make another one of my Trent only statements, there's a lot of conversations about, oh, defund the police. We defund higher education every year. It gets hit every year. Someone asked me recently about why is college so expensive? I said, pause. I've been in the game 25 years. Yeah, I know I look great. But 25 years ago at Southeast, we got about 60% of our funding from the state. This year, it's less than 30%. So it's not an issue of it becoming more expensive because, you know, blah, blah, blah. We're not state supported, we're state enhanced. We have to remember that part. Number two, when people provide scholarship support for students, they think that $1,000 is a lot of money. I'm not saying that it isn't. We have to start helping our students build that long-term financial aid plan like they build that class schedule. We ask our students every February, how are you paying for next year? And building that action in. The state is also looking at, now that we've combined Department of Higher Education, workforce development, there's a direct lean for workforce development. Don't let that deter your students from seeking a college degree. Now, I fully believe that college may not be for everybody, but it should be an option for everybody. Next question. Uh-oh, check my time. Okay, cool. Takeaways.
Yeah, we can probably do about 5. I think you're almost done, Trent. About 5 more minutes. Yep, and then we'll move on.
Perfect. Number 1, the impact of COVID currently and moving forward. This will be with us for a minute. Stop wringing our hands and falling out and falling out and slopping, falling out, foaming at the mouth. This is what it is. What we have to give our students is the structure they need to be successful in it. And the cool part about it is we're all learning new navigational skills that'll benefit us all moving forward. I mean, I didn't know who Zoom was really, 7, 8 months ago. Now I'm trying to get some stock. Number 2, is test optional, temporary, or permanent decision for institutions? We are calling it temporary. I can tell you if enrollment does stabilize, it'll be permanent. Make your plans on knowing when your student does need a test as well. Because if you guys pay attention to this, the step before test optional was super scoring. That was the first shot at this. Now it's test optional. And we all know that people don't do optional, people do mandatory. If it's optional, first thing we say is, do I have to? So your students who are seeking scholarships, check for the ones that don't require an ACT score, that do require letters of recommendation. And we should all have our fancy letters ready to go. I am always tickled when I get a letter of recommendation with the wrong name on it, because somebody just popped it up and sent it out. I always send it back with like a little smile on it. Not for the students. I'm gonna roll with the student because they need support. We have to be holistic in our support as well. How do we provide support for the considerations of match and fit in the virtual space? Use this virtual space to your benefit. On the match end, once again, you want to talk to, you need to have your team ready. Build your bench at your institutions. We all have that one person that we might kind of know at a school that we lean on. Is that person a decision maker or a bureaucrat? Get you a team. And right now, all of you have what we're looking for: potential students to attend our institutions and be successful. Structure that in to what you work with your students on. Something I thought was neat that I saw was one of my colleagues at another institution, they were doing their own weird school fairs. At first I thought, what are you doing? We walked through it. It actually helped out with one, because what she did was she got parents and families on Zoom. She did 3 families at a time, and she had herself and she had people from an institution. And right there, she conducted it in 30 minutes. And she built that in. The 3 families were there. I think one family was actually on a computer in the same space she was in. But she started structuring that. I'm going to make my time intentional in these hits. And so she's building it in. And we talked about that, building it in. Right now, we've talked about continuing interviews virtually to improve our students' ability to interview for jobs and building that actually in. Last one. What additional considerations for match and fit in the current space? How are you as an advocate going to make this tool work for you? We've all been doing this since March. I know we're all zoomed out. I think at the end of the day, I'm tired now than I was live and in color. You have to be intentional. But what I've also done, I shared that with a young lady I met with earlier. You take that one day to work offline and plan the work. Don't zoom yourself out so if your student pops in at 3:30, you drag it and they drag it. If it's not working for that time period, don't do it. But have a plan now. Build your plan. Lay it out. Number 1, institutional team. Number 2, match is pragmatic. You're not telling a student what they can't do. You're building a structure of what they can do. I say all the time, if it takes you 10 grand to go to Southeast, this isn't your school. Not to make you didn't hear that. Number 3, make sure
not in admissions.
That's true. Make sure that the families know that they're a part of this decision-making process. Because often, that's where the rub may come in. We know our students listen to our families and follow their peers. We know that. So build that in. Like I said, when Roxanne had the event with a couple of families together, she's very strategic. And so having them there and having them prepped ahead of time really made it go well. And it was kind of neat to watch. The 3 families, the school, they had been prepped beforehand. It went very, very well. And to Amber's point that I thought about, the one mother said, and where's the student that we can meet? And so we got to kind of build that into. You all have alums, and now you have this virtual space. Hit them up. Get them to tell you the truth. I'm always worried with the usual suspect. You know, they bring out the shiny kid. I want to see the kid that looks like I did when I was an undergrad, dragging, telling me the truth.
We have another question from the chat. So wondering, what are your thoughts on merit aid versus need-based aid? So with the move to test optional, there are a lot of ideas around moving dollars from merit to need. And so just wondering your thoughts on that.
Once again, these are my thoughts, because I don't want to have to be fighting. Be careful of 2 things. Number 1, we have to remove the perception that need-based aid means lower test scores and lower ability. We have to break that. I often say to people, I have students that have high need and have high ability. Because sometimes when you say need by itself, it connotes poor and less prepared and less understanding. We have to be careful about that. Number 2, merit-based aid. Now they're having conversations about ACT scores. I guarantee you institutions are going to start rethinking that and building their portfolio. So I think that number 1, I'm going to see an increase in need-based aid, not by the state, by the institutions. Because I always say, you have to remember, that if the Pell Grant was indexed with inflation, it'd be over $22 grand right now. And that fact comes from the Pell Institute. Don't believe anything I tell you without a reference. So you have to think about it that way. Because right now, our institutions are looking for that Pell Grant money. The scholarships are discounts that we don't get. When it comes to merit-based aid with students, just like you teach students how to write that recommendation letter, they got to write that scholarship request letter as well. I've gotten a few of those before, where a student wrote me and said, you know what? I'm going to do very well. I missed the mark right here by this. Will you consider it? Will you consider it? And I did. I didn't give him the full award, but I gave him more than he would have gotten had I not gotten that letter. It's funny because people seem to be so afraid to tell a student that they're low income. They know they're low income. This ain't new news. They just found out today. So stop shaming that part. When you look at need-based aid and merit-based aid, take a shot at that merit-based aid. You got this strong student. I had a student who had, I saw his 8-semester transcript. There was a rough semester in that transcript. He had a death in his family, a very important death in his family. His grades went down. That should be taken into consideration. It wasn't indicative of his entire performance. So we have to get our students and our institutions look at the holistic picture as they award that aid. Because people give money to students who already have money, which shocks me all the time. So be careful about that trap. And stop letting our students feel less than because they think that they're low income and don't have it. Some of the best students I've ever worked with came from low income backgrounds and knocked it out. Okay, I got to stop preaching because I see the clock tick.
I have a question if you don't mind before we
Please do.
go. So earlier we talked about college entry exams and how college and institutions would be putting more preparation into effect for the students, including grad students. But some of my students this past year was experiencing financial hardships, and we were discussing waivers and the structure. How has the structure, of course it's virtual, but how has the structure of the ACT and SAT changed, and will they be providing more waivers for the students, or will we be providing more waivers for the students?
I do believe, let me do the second one first. I do believe that they are going to extend the waiver process more at every level because of the cancel test. Think about it this way, through a business model. They haven't recouped the funding since April of what they would normally had on testing processing. And they weren't necessarily, ACT and Missouri weren't the ones that made the decision to cancel the test. Just like any good business, there'll be more coupons.
Okay.
Number two, to your first question, institutions are now building in, and this is where you talk about advanced placement, dual credit, and dual enrollment. We're all starting to look at how to expand that, which will assist for preparation. And my first question always is, and who pays for that? So I've asked, will the options for the support follow the same pricing schedule we do for Pell Grant, waive application fees? So yeah, the conversation is actually going on, and you guys can help push that conversation with institutions as well. And I'll throw a piece with that. I did see a model of virtual preparation that ACT is looking at. And what I liked about it was that we're going to have recorded sessions that people can access. I'll keep my eye on that. I have a colleague who's on the council. I'll keep talking with her about that. When that's available, I'll get that to Laura.
Thank you.
Anytime. I think you guys have my email somewhere in here, I'm assuming. If not, you can find me, I'm sure.
If not, I'm sure it'll go out in the notes or be on the site. We can make sure that it goes out.
Excellent.
Big thank you to Trent for sharing all of his wisdom and insights, and thank you for all of the great questions. Our last slide that we have up here just has a list of tech tools that many of you probably use, but you might find some new ones here as well. But since students are, using more virtual tools, we thought we would share some of the great ones that are online. I know when I was directly advising students, I liked to use Big Future to compare colleges. I found it really easy because you could put 2 or 3 colleges all right up next to each other, and that really helped students. And then College Greenlight, which is kind of similar to Big Future, but really focused on first-generation students. They have some great scatter plots and data where students enter their grades, their ACT, any of that information, and whether they got admitted. So students can see pretty easily a student like me got admitted to this school, or a student like me usually didn't get admitted to that school. So sometimes that made that conversation easier too, where it wasn't just me saying, your grades don't match up. They could kind of see other students' experiences. But if you have any other tech tools, feel free to share them in the chat, and these will all be posted when we post the notes and the slides from this presentation as well. A few announcements. Laura will have these on the site, but there's some great emails out there on yielded admissions. KIPP has shared their senior decisions tracker, so that will be available as well. The FAFSA preview is out from Federal Student Aid, so if you want to start building your FAFSA workshops and handouts and all that, those will all be available online. The Scholarship Foundation has also updated their FAFSA guide, and I saw online this week that they will be doing virtual workshops this year if you're interested in those. And then there are some upcoming webinars on equity and admissions post-pandemic. So again, if you look at the presentation, you can click on these, or these will be on the St. Louis Graduates website. Finally, this weekend, the MOACAC virtual college and career fairs start. Michelle told me at the beginning of this, there are over 2,200 participants signed up. So thank you for spreading the word and helping get your students signed up. But there are fantastic presentations, so definitely a great way to connect students to information. And then at the end of the month, the next episode of the Degrees with Less Debt video series will premiere. A is for affordability, which touched on many of the things that we talked about today. So again, that'll be a YouTube premiere with a Twitter chat, not an in-person presentation, but if you watched that first presentation, it's a great video with fantastic information. And as always, Laura has the COVID-19 resource page up to date with any information that you may need.
I have one
So
more
as
plug.
we go for it, Trent.
Shameless plug. We are looking for a new assistant director for our TRIO programs. Our Southeast website has the position, or email me, I can share it with you, and it closes on the 18th. Thanks.
Great. That is excellent. Excellent news. I'm sure everyone knows somebody who would be great for that. So as we prepare to log off, it would be great if you could chat one word to describe how you're feeling after today's workshop. Thank you for your questions, your participation, your patience through all of my technology challenges. So grateful for you and all the work you do for your students. Laura said it best down there at the bottom. Stay safe, stay well, do your best. You are all amazing. It's great to hear that people learned a lot today. So enjoy the rest of the day and the weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.